but it's the ability to bring those voters with you.
It's complicated and you don't need to worry about it.
It's been very well canvassed that as a party, we don't think the way that Darlene acted was in line with our values and principles.
I really had to think about, how am I going to change things up? How am I going to get through this? Because I don't want to fail.
It is foul and personal and violent.
Job is to make sure that we are showing New Zealanders that there is an alternative to the divisive approach of this government, that you can bring people together.
I mean, I think one of the things that any government of whatever stripe has to realise that every minister has to be a climate minister now.
When you've got a country that's got a young population but they don't get involved, you might want to have a grown-up chat about that.
We don't want a situation where government dictates the local government, but you want to make sure the system is set up so that it's easy for communities to make a decision.
I'd be really interested to see if the officials that advise that a Crown Observer was necessary or should be put in place, or whether he's made that judgment call himself.
I don't think we did, and I've said this, I don't think, because it happened quite quickly last time, I don't know that we did a good enough job of bringing the public with us.
Remember, just by having Mary Walls doesn't guarantee that mana whenua are going to be represented around the table.
Suggests that whānau with a disability and those who care and support them are somehow grifters.
I do love the new beginning, the new opening thing. It is very fun. Good evening, everybody. I hope we've got lots of people tuning in. We've got a really interesting episode tonight. Blake, do you want to set it up while I sit here and slowly lose my voice?
Well, I had to put it together very, very fast. That's all I'll say. So we've decided to call it the State of the Nation. So throughout the evening, we'll be having a lot of people coming in and talking about the state of the nation, probably speeches.
I mean, we've heard the phrase State of the Nation, I think, from 3 different speeches this week. We had the 2 Chris's and, of course, David Seymour today, who used the actual phrase without irony that the problem with the country at the moment is indoctrinated universities infesting students with the woke mind virus. So today's poll on our YouTube page, on my YouTube page, is what should be the response to a politician who uses a line so inherently ridiculously stupid? Should he quit being a politician? Should he be fired from his role? Should he never, ever, ever be Deputy Prime Minister? Or should we just laugh at him at every opportunity that we can?
Yeah. First up tonight, we've got Nick Ruane and Dr. Will Flavell. So we'll bring them in.
I'd also just like to point out very briefly that, Blake, you missed something last week, and I had to get told off in the comments section about a mistake that I made when I introduced everybody that we had and the show and the news, and nobody picked up on it except for one person in the comments.
What did I do?
I missed the date. I did that stupid, it's January 2024 thing instead of going 2025. And all of the content that we put out last week, it said 2024.
I didn't know this. That's not like me anyway. Hello, gentlemen. How are we?
We're great, thank you. Really great to see you guys. Really great to be here and great to have this conversation.
So,
Happy New Year.
So Nick, I'll start with you. So I'm doing let's talk about health a little bit because I'm in the middle of writing a piece for you. So how have you heard the feedback from the new health minister this last week since the reshuffle?
It's probably a little bit too early to say anything particular about our new health minister other than he's had a visit to a hospital, which is probably a good thing to do if you are a health minister. But I think it's a concerning time in health right now. I think what we're seeing is a lot of cuts, and particularly for I'm thinking about the post that you wrote, Blake. If you really want to get an appointment and go and see your GP or your specialist, that's what the new minister is talking about. That's the rhetoric coming out of the minister. But ultimately, I think that's one of the things that we really need to focus on in terms of building up the capacity, the numbers of GPs, the numbers of health specialists. And I think if you're busy focusing on cutting our health system right back to the bone, I just can't see how you can achieve those two things at the same time. So, I mean, I'm quite concerned at the moment. I was concerned last year, and I'm equally concerned at the moment.
How are you finding the reaction in your local area, Will?
Again, similar story to Nick. Yeah, it is very new. News. I have known Simeon since he was elected to the local board. So to see him sort of go quite highly in the National Party rankings has been a little bit surprising. But he's there. And as New Zealanders, we all expect a really good health system. I had friends, for example, who had just qualified to become a nurse last year, but weren't able to get jobs. I mean, that's ridiculous. Our healthcare system should be employing, having spaces for our nurses, and it wasn't the case last year. So, I wish him all the best. It will be a difficult role.
Paul? Yeah.
I'm very curious about how you guys feel around the fact that we have a new Minister for Health who has been very vocal in the past about being anti-abortion, about being pro-life, who when the abortion law change came in to put in safe spaces around abortion clinics, tried to put in an amendment to the bill to record every woman who went in and got the services done. How does that make you guys feel when you realize that that's the kind of person that we've now got running a health system?
Disgusted, absolutely disgusting. I'm very pro-choice. Women should never be dictated by others in terms of what they do with their own bodies. So, very appalled by that. But we know his extremist views regarding his religion, and he's made it clear that he's made it very clear, and we will keep him accountable to that his own personal views won't get in the way of the decisions that he makes as the Minister of Health. But we've known what he's been like for the last 10 years or so. Disgusted, obviously, by his previous views, and I hope that doesn't sort of get in the way of the decisions that he makes from now to the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Will more on this one. I think those types of views really have no place in decision making around access to healthcare. For me, access to healthcare is a human right, and it has absolutely no any form of religious provide access to healthcare for all of our citizens here in Aotearoa. So for me, that's very concerning, and it's not the only member of the current government who's expressed views similar to this. So it's a growing trend in this current government where we have members of the executive who are expressing views that really are about reducing access to healthcare, particularly around religious affiliation, and that's really quite concerning because I come back to the position that healthcare is a human right, and it's something that everyone should have access to, and we shouldn't be restricting that. We should actually be growing that access and providing more access to communities. So, yeah, very concerning.
Another topic I want to cover is education. So we've seen Minister Erica Stanford tone down the learning supports, which is a really important thing that we have an issue with. How do you feel about the reducing learning supports and all, just education in general, and what do you hope to see for 2025?
Well, as a former secondary school teacher for over a decade, we should be fully resourcing our education system. I remember always the lack of resources for learning support for our OARS system in our schools, and not everyone has the same deal or the same go when it comes to education. Obviously, some people need more support than others. And so I'm always been a fan of more teacher aides, more external health support for our learning support students as well. I'm very keen to see that. I guess, Blake, I've just come from a conference today looking at AI in the schooling system and how that's triggered many of our teachers and our principals, and how schools react to AI was really interesting. And there's sort of no clear guidelines on that. It's up to the schools to determine how they sort of police AI. No doubt that's going to be an interesting topic for this year. I think about assessments, exams, and how our students are utilizing AI, knowing full well that our teachers are using AI to write lesson plans, to write, to create resources. So we're utilizing AI in our education system for most of it. But when it comes to assessment, schools are trying to figure out how to police that. And we know artificial intelligence is constantly changing and quite rapidly and fast as well. So I think that's an area of interest that we all should be looking at, particularly for this year.
Anything to add, Nick?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all the points that Will made. They're very well made points. For me, one of the things that I do outside of all of the other things I do is chair a group called Education for All, which is a cross-sectoral group that's really focused on boosting the understanding around inclusive education. And for me, I think we really need to take it back to first principles around inclusive education, because really at the moment we don't have the guaranteed right for all kids to enter their local primary school or their local school, whether that's primary or secondary school. It's not a guaranteed right, and I think we need to really have a conversation about how we enable that to happen for every child, whether they have learning support needs or not, to enter their local school and to be supported and funded to enter their local school, because that's just not happening at the moment. I then start to look at our Ministry of Education. There is no actual plan around learning support and how to achieve the goals and aims that we have, that we expect for all of our kids with learning support needs. And that's deeply, deeply concerning. So effectively, we're failing generations upon generations of kids that are going through school. These are things that are just not widely known or understood. So yeah, I think we really need to take it back to first principles and start at the basics. We have nothing at early childhood. It's just a desert of support and training and policies for our kids. So it's one of the areas that I'm probably most concerned about, because education leads on to opportunity, and at the moment we're just not doing enough.
Just quickly, before I hand that to Paul, how does it make you feel, guys, that Stanford is using quotes like we must have a one size approach for everybody, not a one size fits all approach. I think that's ethically wrong, especially going back to Will's point earlier about every situation is different, especially for the ones with learning support issues. We can't have just a stock standard approach. I mean, it would be nice, but it's just not feasible.
You're correct, Blake. Schools, we need to organize a one size fits one. That's what the education system should be really like. But the reality is the difficulty of resourcing, difficulty of not having enough teachers, not having enough support. And it is quite difficult. Like, I remember when I used to teach, the largest class that I had was 38 kids in one classroom. And, that was given to me and I just had to do it. That was my Te Reo Māori class. And it was either, then you need to take some kids out of your classroom. And I thought, well, actually, if these kids want to do Te Reo Māori, what right do I have to kick kids out of the class? what the school should be doing instead is employing more Te Reo Māori teachers within the school to provide, every kid's right to learn Te Reo Māori. And that just shows to me that our schools continue to be poorly resourced in resources and in teaching staff as well. So I'm a big fan of a one-size-fits-one approach, and schools are getting better at that. Don't get me wrong, but again, I think it does come to resourcing.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was going to change the topic completely and give you guys a number: 72,900 people. It's the number of New Zealanders who packed up and moved off overseas from I think it was end of November 2023 to the end of November 2024. It's the largest exodus we have ever seen in the history of this country. Can you tell me why that is?
Well, I mean, the political side of me would say that the people are just totally over the national, the coalition government, and they want to go and live in Australia, where it's being governed by a Labor-led government. That would be the political side of me.
But now there's an election coming up there that might change.
Well, I know. So maybe they're all going to come back, but so that's just the raw politics in me coming out. But that's clearly not what's happening, and we know that's not what's happening. I mean, people are leaving because they're making a choice, and they're looking at the money that's coming into their bank account every week, and they're looking on the online, and they're looking at potential salaries that they could be achieving in other places, probably Australia, and they're just making a decision for their own families, and because people just want to get ahead, they want their families to get ahead. And they're just looking at an opportunity that could maybe get them ahead. And I think that's, I'm not throwing judgment on them. I'm not, saying that they're making the wrong choice, because ultimately they're just trying to get their family ahead. But they're looking at all of the costs that they're facing, and they're just making a choice that they believe is right for their family.
Paul, I think, I guess, when you cull nearly 10,000 public service roles and jobs, there's one answer there as well. Also, when the cost of living is extremely high, I just looked at a recent local ad for Tank, the smoothie shop, and, 400 people applying for that role. That shows to me the crisis that we have in terms of the availability of roles. And actually, actually, when you look at across the digital Australia, the jobs are better paid. Paul, I won't lie, I've had thoughts about from time to time heading to Australia. I mean, I see when teachers are on 150, 170,000 Australian dollars, that does sometimes sound attractable. And so I like to think that. Hopefully that we do keep our talent here in Aotearoa. The government needs to prioritise keeping our talent here. And it is a shame that I do have friends in whānau that have gone to Australia.
When you look over the State of the Nation speeches that we've had this week, because we've had 3 of them, and they are very different sort of speeches. Chris Luxon's was very much focused on what he calls growth. Chris Hipkins is very much focused on where Labour is going to be going for the year, and David Seymour's was very much focused on taking New Zealand first, conspiracy theorist, weird nut job voters. What do you think that those speeches got right, and what do you think that those politicians are getting wrong about where the country is today? Yeah, a simple question. Nice shallow question for you all.
I mean, that's a pretty full-on question there, Paul, but we'll have a crack at it and see how we go. I mean, I think fundamentally there's a narrative that's starting to play out from our governing coalition at the moment, that essentially there is no role for government, and that they're starting to hollow out the state. Particularly, you saw it coming in from ACT, less so from National, but I mean, I'm sure that they're on board for the ride. And I think for the communities that I represent, particularly for disability communities, other communities that are marginalised, I think that's a very scary narrative. but certainly we've just briefly touched on education, but there's other areas as well. Healthcare, we've also touched on that as well. That we're starting to see this narrative that the state has no role in our lives in terms of providing services, having an active role. And I think for me, that's a very concerning narrative to start to put out there and for people to start to believe. Again, we saw in the ACT State of the Nation speech that we need to start selling state assets, particularly housing. That's a very concerning narrative to start to run, because we have one of the proudest histories of building state houses, of anywhere. So for me, that's really where the difference sits around what is the role that the state plays, how fundamentally what role the state plays. And we have a very different prescription from the governing coalition. And I mean, Chris Hipkins didn't go into too much detail, but I feel pretty strongly that there is a different narrative coming out from Labour and also from Greens and Te Pāti Māori as well.
I think with Prime Minister Luxon, did he forget that at the end of last year we had the largest hikoi in our nation's history, thousands marching, and so we've got issues where this government has created an issue like the Treaty Principles Bill, and simply ignoring that and the divisive nature that's caused. Race relations gone backwards, all that really good work around with the Māori, with Māori communities, all that good work in the past, starting to strain. And so he's completely ignored that. You cannot have economic growth when you're sort of constantly putting the knife through Māori communities, Māori issues. And that's detrimental to all of us as a nation. This is an opportunity for the leader of the Labour Party, Chris Hipkins. It's an opportunity for him to really showcase his appeal to be the next Prime Minister. So I think I would like him and the Labour Party to really focus on, again, those really basic issues, the cost of living, things that affect New Zealanders daily. And of course, to really go against what this government has done. I think of, for example, the added prescription charges that the National Party put on. That's has had a detrimental effect in terms of healthcare for New Zealanders, including Māori. And so, I think this is the year for the opportunity for the Labour Party to really put the case forward to New Zealand on why the Labour Party should be leading the next government.
Anything else, Paul? Before we
I've got a million questions. I'm very curious as well about what your guys' opinions are on the 346,000 reported submissions for the Treaty Principles Bill.
I'll touch on that, Paul. And I was gutted that I wasn't given an opportunity to publicly speak on my submission. I not only submitted an individual submission, but I did a submission on behalf of the Henderson Massey local board elected members, and we represent nearly 140,000 people in our area. Now, that whole process, it's been estimated cost $6 million. For me, that's a waste of money. And I think about the cuts that David Seymour made in terms of the food in schools, what he did there, he drastically cut the budget for that so much that schools would employ local whānau, local parents to help cook the food, and now that's simply not the case now. They're relying on these major companies that has shown that it produces low quality food. So I worry about that particular scheme. With those thousands that have submitted, I believe that every one of those people who submitted and that wanted to speak on their submission should be able to do so. That's about giving every New Zealander the chance and opportunity to do so, and that's a shame. That really is a shame.
Yeah, no, I agree with Will on that one. I had two organisational submissions, one from Deaf and Disabled Network through the Public Service Association, the other through Education for All, and then a personal submission. And I think really, I mean, if we believe in democracy and public participation through the Parliament, then I think everyone should be given their right to be heard, because that's really what the process is about. And I think if we're going to expend all that money, $6 million of taxpayers' money, then everyone should be given the right to be heard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a lovely way to end it, I think. Paul, don't you think?
Yeah, it works for me. Works very much for me. One more quick question, though, for both of you, which is completely unrelated to all the rest of everything. Will, I think I know the answer to this one, and Nick, I'd be very surprised if the answer was no, but are you guys registered to vote and ready to vote in your local body elections this year?
I am absolutely ready. I will be running again for my 5th term, and the reason why, because I just love my community. I love everything about West Auckland. I'm actively involved in my community, and it's special to me. So why not have the honour to represent my community again? I am perhaps worried about the turnout for for voting. I've always advocated for an opportunity to vote online or other methods of voting. I do like the idea of something similar to the national elections, where we open up our skills and our community halls for a full day of voting to really advertise and push that out. Unfortunately, that won't be the case here in Auckland, and it'll be status quo again. So expect, hopefully we have a bigger voting turnout of more than 35%, because it does average around 35%, which is extremely low when it comes to democracy. But hopefully we can push further than that.
Yeah. Well, if I could vote for you, I would, but it's just not possible being that I am down here in Whanganui, Atara, Wellington. But I am definitely registered to vote and will be pretty active in the campaigns down here in Wellington to make sure that we get some councillors that don't want to cut everything back to the bone and make things difficult over the next 3 years. So yes, I will answer yes and yes to your questions, Paul. Thank you for asking them.
And just to add my 2 cents, I'll be helping Nick on the campaign trail for get up on good councillors.
My aim this year is to try and get as many people out there voting in local body elections as possible, because as you said, well, the turnout is terrible. The one that throws me is country voting. People who vote in rural electorates, the numbers tend to be far lower than the ones that vote in the city, which is something I've always found a bit of a weird inconsistency. But yeah, it's my mission to try and get people out there to vote. And I'm going to just free sales pitch for something I wrote that came out today on my newsletter. I got leaked. You guys are going to love this, actually. I got leaked a document, an 18-page manifesto from within the New Zealand Loyal Voices for Freedom network on how they intend to take over local government this year and what they intend to do to go out and win the vote and stuff like that. But the reason that I got this was because there is a individual further down the line who needs some serious mental health help, who has started a weird email chain where she's telling everybody her poetry. And somehow she's tied in me and a whole bunch of very well-known people within the freedom movement, and they don't know the difference between reply and reply all. And they sent a reply all with this 18-page manifesto from Hamilton City Councillor Andrew Bidder on what they need to do to take over the council this year. Because if they don't, woke is going to get you.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's a lovely way to finish.
It's a whole nother episode right there.
It's the newsletter that came out today. Paid subscribers can get it now. Free subscribers can pick it up on Sunday, and there'll be a link that goes out on everything on Sunday. So it'll be great fun for people to watch.
On that note, thank you, Will. Thank you, Nick, for coming as always. It's always good to hear your knowledge and the knowledge that you bring. So thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Thanks,
good
guys.
To see you.
That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And my camera's getting a little glitchy. I don't know what's causing it.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart my camera, and while I'm doing that, you can have a chat to Anne, who's waiting in the waiting room.
You hear me, Blake?
Hello. How are you?
Hello, how are you? Happy New Year.
Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, the year started off pretty quickly. We're well and truly into it. Lots of challenges coming up our way. But had a lovely time with my family over Christmas and New Year, and been doing a bit of gardening and all the rest. What have you been up to? Did you get time to spend with your family?
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you what it was before. So what's your opinion on the new health minister?
Right. Yes, well, I think I've already expressed my thoughts on that on several venues. But basically, a change of minister is not going to change anything. What we need is policies that are put in place and funding to actually go with it. And right now, we'll have to wait and see. It's an opportunity for the new minister to change the conversation, and hopefully that will happen. I'm not sure, though, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Any questions that you've got, Paul?
I'm very curious from inside the medical industry, the health sector at the moment, what has been the reaction to Dim Sim's new role?
Well, it's been very interesting watching them with Facebook and posts that are going up here, there, and everywhere. I have been seeing vilification of Simeon, but others are saying, let's just give him a chance. And I find that really interesting. A lot of people are focusing on the person rather than what we actually need to achieve. This government has been very, very clear. It doesn't seem to be the friend of the majority of people in this country. Unless you're rich and you're a landlord, you are not benefiting from the policies that they're putting out. And I understand that Seymour today announced that he's very keen on privatising health, which we all knew was coming. The signals have been pretty loud and clear, but it's overt now. And that's a real worry for me, because the vast majority of people in this country cannot afford health insurance, rely on a public health system. And unless that ideology and that policy changes, the health and well-being of the people in this country are going to become a lot worse, particularly for those who have already got challenges, who are disadvantaged and by the system, which is particularly racist in our health system, unfortunately. And it's just going to get a whole lot worse. Having said all of that, as a nurse of 45 years, I have huge hope that our healthcare professionals and all our support teams will stand up and really fight back. And I know the Council of Trade Unions is using exactly those words to push all the action and I suppose, what's the word? Strategies to push back on all of what's happening. And I believe in New Zealand. I believe in New Zealanders. I believe that when they've had enough, they will stand up and actually push back real hard. And that was evident by what happened at the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Hikoi, the 35,000 people who stood up over a period of days in the southern region. It was huge. I've never seen anything like it. And people are just not, they'll be pushed so far, but no further. So I've got hope in the people of this country.
I saw a number today, 72,900 New Zealanders left in the last 12 months, like packed up and gone
I know.
for greener pastures. Half of them to Australia. I don't know the situation over there for nurses. Is it a better offer on the table for those nursing graduates, for example, that we're hearing about not being able to get jobs within the health service here?
It all depends on which state you're in. Most of the states are provide a hell of a lot of opportunity, better wages, nurse-patient ratio legislation, except for New South Wales, which is fighting really, really hard to be heard by the state government, and they're just being ignored. But they're fighting really, really hard, and they've got the public behind them. But for the rest of the states, particularly Queensland, their head nurse, the chief nurse, plus the the Queensland government are working very positively and cohesively together to ensure that the things that we should be looking at in New Zealand, and that's the health and well-being of their population, are put first and foremost in all the decisions that they make. They are innovative and they are absolutely showing true leadership. For instance, the Queensland government recognised that you don't get a real pay rise unless you've actually got the inflation rate covered. So they actually put that in the contract for the nurses, that the conversations about pay rises won't even start until that's actually been covered. They've got nurse-patient ratio legislation, which is actually being not only in the hospitals, but is being spread out through aged care and I suppose the primary health sector that they call it over there. They are doing what needs to be done, and this is one of the reasons why our nurses are heading over there, because not only do they get good jobs, good pay, they can work safely because they don't have huge workloads, but they get real paid opportunity to advance their practice and become clinical specialists, educators, charge nurses, nurse practitioners, you name it. And their university and research programs over there are incredible. And they're also building hospitals. Thank you for that. I saw that. Yes, they are. So why wouldn't you go if you were young and you had the opportunity? But last year, I did a lot of travelling around New Zealand and met with a lot of nurses and spoke with third-year student nurses who are about to graduate. And their stories just were, they were awful. They said the same thing over and over again. We want to stay in New Zealand. We trained in New Zealand. We want to provide care for our families, for our communities. And yet I am facing having no choice. Can you give me any kind of hope that I will get a job? And I had to be honest, I couldn't do that. And that was just plain awful. We should be actually hiring every single registered nurse and enrolled nurse graduate in this country who are New Zealand trained, understand the culture, are challenged to provide care that is not racist. They know and understand our country and the people. We need to have those here first and foremost in the country. And we're not supporting them in their training either. They don't get paid to do their clinical placements. In Australia, they do. In Australia now, they actually have living wages for the undergraduate nurses. They're doing a whole lot over there that we could be doing here.
What sort of craziness is that?
It is all very, very straightforward and simple. You know, this government has just announced that they're going to make it easier for overseas doctors to come and work here. How about making it easier for our doctors to stay here? I mean, I ask you, there is no rationale for any of this. And down the line, it's going to cost more, because it has been shown that there are sometimes issues when you have different cultures interacting with each other, because there are misunderstandings in the communication. You know, I suppose, Paul, in your line of work, you have a specific kind of language and understanding that you can use in a short-term kind of way. It's the same for the medical and nursing fraternity. We can talk to each other very, very quickly and succinctly in emergencies and when the pressure is on. But if you don't come from that kind of background, misunderstandings happen. And that can have really terrible ramifications for the patient that's at the end of the line.
We've got a question here that's coming from one of the viewers, which, sorry, Blake, I'll interrupt. I'll get the question out of the way first.
I was going to say that anyway.
Sam from It's in the Ballot wants to know, do you think that Simeon would cope with a CEA contract negotiations? And do you think either partial strike or full strike actions could occur?
He appears to be ultra conservative. I can't speak for him, of course. I wouldn't know how he would react. And as I said earlier, I hope that he takes the opportunity to actually change the context that we're in at the moment. I know that the negotiations between the nurses and Te Whatu Ora right now have just restarted. And Te Whatu Ora has apparently put on the table that nurses are already well paid and they don't really need a pay rise. They're offering 0 to 1%. That, of course, is completely untrue, because they are using statistics and information that shouldn't be part and parcel of their decision making. And of course, we push back on that. But it just worries me, because Te Whatu Ora is known for pushing out contract negotiations for a long time. And of course, this coalition government has announced that there will be no back pay. So there's an incentive right now for any employer to push negotiations out as long as they can, because they're saving money. And in terms of strike, you know, striking, partial and full strikes, they have their place in negotiations that are not actually getting anywhere. But I think that we need to be a whole lot more innovative and clever about how we stand together and fight back. And I believe that this government is already aware of that, because they're talking about what they call partial strikes, or not doing your work as per contract as being seen as a strike. It's not in legislation yet, but they're working on it. So, for instance, if we as nurses decided to not do overtime or extra shifts, which are not required under most of our contracts, the whole health system in the Te Whatu Ora health system would come to a total halt within 24 hours if we did that one thing. But they're looking to stop that kind of stuff. So I think that right now, this is the
that sort of falls into that we've had come through as well. Wanting to know what you think the impact of the employment relations bill is going to have on nursing.
What do you think the employment relations pay deductions for partial strikes? Yeah, I actually think that is completely and totally unethical. And the reason for that is, who is going to actually make a decision about what that looks like? It seems to me that the employer is going to decide, and the employer is going to take the money. And it is disempowering nurses, and it is once again, I suppose, from my point of view, a reflection of gender discrimination and oppression. That's exactly how I see it. This is becoming a more and more patriarchal kind of government, and for those of you who understand that word, that's basically, it's a man's world, and it still is. And this is exactly the kind of strategy that I would expect a patriarchal, unethical government to do. I think it is just wrong.
Yeah, I guess I would ask, do you think as this whole nursing underpayment saga continues that we could end up with a similar march or hikoi than we had for the treaty principles bill sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I understood your question, Blake. Could you repeat it?
So I was asking basically, do you think that we could end up with a situation where we could have a march for the nurses similar to the hikoi that we had for the treaty principles bill if this payment saga were to continue for an extended period?
Yeah. It is very, very possible, because nurses are seen by the public as the number one ethical profession that they trust. And they are well and truly behind us in heart and mind. What we need them to do is also come and stand with us when we actually do any kind of action. And that's the important part. I think if the public realise that the health system is a hell of a lot worse than it has ever been, and it affects them personally, and from a community point of view, they will come and stand up. Look at what happened on the West Coast when Malcolm Mulholland decided to start a petition and had the moment of silence because they couldn't get enough doctors and nurses there. This is the kind of thing that we will see grow more and more, but we have to do it in a cohesive fashion. In terms of underpay, that's quite a complex subject, Blake, because right now we have Te Whatu Ora, and a lot of people think of health in terms of hospitals, but in actual fact, most of the health care really needs to be delivered in the primary health sector, because that's where you can prevent and have early intervention so that people don't need hospitals in the first place. And there the nurses are actually being substantially underpaid. They do not have equitable pay and conditions to the Te Whatu Ora nurses. And I think that's really where we need to focus our attention. We need to grow the health workforce in primary health care. Yes, primary health care is in crisis. We've got GPs who are aging and leaving. GP organisations who are closing their books to new patients, and there just aren't enough nurses to do the job. For instance, a simple thing like vaccinations, immunisations. There aren't enough of us to actually do it. This is one of the right reasons why government has decided to include pharmacists and being able to vaccinate. But that's not the answer. The answer is a really substantial increase in workforce within primary healthcare and Te Whatu Ora, and equitable pay and conditions right throughout the country for nurses, no matter where they work. And then they will be able to make a choice about where they want to stay. For instance, a lot of people don't work in aged care because the pay and conditions are not equitable. But there are a lot of nurses who want to work there. So let's do a very, very simple thing and have equitable pay and conditions. And I know for a fact that people will stay in primary health and aged care because of it. I'm not quite seeing. Are there any more questions there,
Yeah, we've got a
Blake?
few that are creeping through here at the moment. Sam wants to know whether or not increasing doctor placements from 500 to 600 is going to be a good starting point for trying to get the system back into equilibrium.
Increasing the doctor placement for 500. It will help, but it's a drop in the ocean. I just said we need substantial workforce increase, and that is true in primary healthcare and in the hospitals. We're just not training enough, and you could start talking about the need for an extra medical education facility in Hamilton. We just don't need that. We need to increase Auckland and Dunedin placements substantially. I see the doctors that I work with run ragged trying to actually keep up and do the job that they're supposed to do, and there just aren't enough of them.
You might be able to answer a question for me that you raised there. Being a Waikato boy myself, I know the current mayor of Hamilton, all of the local MPs for the last decade have all been 100% behind getting a medical school up and running there. I'm not a big fan of the way the University of Waikato does things, so I'm not sold that they'd be able to do this properly, but that's not from the perspective of being able to actually set up and adequately run this thing. What is the downside to setting up another medical school at this point?
Well, first of all, you haven't got the infrastructure there. That's going to be huge. You have to find the tutors. You have to get a relationship with the Waikato Hospital and the primary health care to have all the clinical placements. Why would you do that when you've already got the infrastructure in Auckland and Dunedin? Dunedin, the Otago Medical School is one of the most top-notch medical schools in the whole world. Why not fund it properly so that it can improve the number of clinical placements or student doctors that it already has? We also need to actually do the same for nurse practitioners. The nurse practitioners in this country are just incredible. The job that they do is just amazing. I work with 3 of them in the emergency department that I work in, and I see what they do, and they used to be registered nurses with me, so I've seen the growth, and we can produce more nurse practitioners quicker than we can doctors, because most of these nurses have already worked in the system for 10 or 15 years. So, and it costs a lot less. And we need them in the hospitals and primary health care and aged care, everywhere you look. That would be one of the answers.
Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, I'm really sorry that you seem to have ended up by yourself. I don't know.
That's all right. Yeah, I thought the mayor was going to come on and we were going to talk hospital business. Was he unable to attend?
We'll assume that that's what happened.
We have no idea.
Okay.
The joys of
right.
The joys of live TV. Well,
yeah. Well, I could speak to the Dunedin Hospital rebuild a little if you'd like me to.
Please do.
Yeah. So, first of all, I'd actually like to give a shout out to the Dunedin Council SOS hospital rebuild team. They are doing an incredible job. They are keeping this campaign alive, and they're doing it in a very innovative and interesting way. If I would love the opportunity to work with them closer. And I have been able to do that over the last 3 or 4 months. And they are just so dedicated to winning this campaign, winning the hospital that we need down here in Dunedin. They are incredible. So, yes, going back to the new minister, he has an opportunity to actually rethink the announcements that Chris Bishop and Dr. Shane Retty made late last year regarding refurbishing the current Dunedin hospital or building a much smaller hospital here. So I'm hoping that he will be able to use his logic and rationale to see that it's going to cost a lot less to actually do the right thing, build it right, build it once, and do it now, rather than continue to push the can or kick the can down the road and keep reviewing all the time the decisions that were made in 2017. I'm really, really hoping that that's going to happen, because we need a tertiary level hospital in this city for the whole of the lower South Island. It is just incredibly necessary. I see people. Yep.
I was going to say, does having a new minister for the South Island change anything in that respect from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a real interesting one. We've got a minister for Auckland and a minister for the South Island. We don't seem to have a minister for the lower North Island or any other particular city. It just doesn't seem to make any real sense to me. And I'm not quite sure what they're going to achieve by having a minister for the South Island. What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
I genuinely think it was a case of we did so much stuff to piss off the people of the South Island. We have to make it look like we're doing something to actually listen to them. And I'm guessing James Meagher is easy on the eye and was able to point to the South Island on a map, and that's how he got the job. He's not a minister in cabinet, because he can't be being the head of a select committee, and he's in the busiest select committee of all at the moment, the Justice Committee. So it is very much, to me, it feels like a piecemeal kind of, look, we know that you're there, South Island. See, we've got one of your own here who is telling us about you and what we need to consider when we ignore him and make our decisions unilaterally anyway.
Yeah, and he doesn't seem to have any particular policy he's standing on or anything that he wants to achieve. It just doesn't make sense to me at all, particularly when this government came in and said we're going to get rid of all the dross in the government and any kind of organisation like health. Here they are constantly appointing people to roles that seem to have absolutely no substance whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions before we let Annie go?
Only one for you, Anne, and it's a very deep, hard question for you. Are you grateful to Lester Levy for saving Milo?
I have never, ever heard anything so ridiculous. Oh, my God. A person in his situation having to sign off on Milo. And, it just shows me how little the people who are making decisions are have no idea and understanding of the clinical interface at all. We need Milo. It's got sugar and it tastes good, and there's very, very little else that we can offer people who actually, when there's no food about. And we also need it for people who are actually having low blood sugars and all sorts of other things. It was just absolutely ridiculous. And for it to be taken away from the staff and the patients was just a no-brainer. But to get that far, it shows how micromanaged the whole system in Te Whatuora is. And if Margie Apa can't make that decision for him, I'm just wondering what all of those people in management are actually doing, because they certainly don't seem to know what they're doing or why they're doing it.
Well, I can actually answer that for you, because there's 14 layers of management, and patients are one of them, and they're not really trained in how to manage hospitals. So that could be where the problem is.
Well, there's a lot of research that actually says that the people who are on the clinical floor know the problems and know the answers. But I can tell you very clearly that nobody is talking to us, you know, and if they do happen to have a conversation in, you know, a quality or a health and safety meeting, it goes absolutely nowhere. In the last 2 years, I have seen meetings called by desperate clinicians over and over again saying, you have no idea how horrendous this particular shift was. You've got to listen to us and get us more staff, get us more support staff, help us to do our job safely. But they are just not listening. And for nurses, we're not even in the room, we're invited into the conversation. And I suspect, well, this is my take on it anyway, we, as a union, we have 62,000 members. We're one of the biggest, well, we are probably the biggest single union in the whole of New Zealand. And we have a huge amount of influence on the public and their perceptions and understanding of what's going on. If we're not invited into the room or asked to be party to making decisions, then they can honestly say that they never knew what we needed to tell them, and they didn't actually have to take any notice of us. It's just crazy how shut out we are at the moment. And I think they're actually quite afraid of us as a union because we have got so much influence over the public. And going back to what you were saying earlier, Blake, this is one of the reasons why I do believe that the public will stand up with us when it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. Well, unless Paul got anything else.
I think it is fair that I ask Anne the same question I finished off the interview with Will and Nick. Are you enrolled to vote, and are you planning on voting in your local body elections this year?
I am very much enrolled to vote. I never miss an opportunity to cast my vote and use the power of one to make a difference. It's interesting because I was actually approached to stand for the local elections this year. Of course I can't because I've already got 2 jobs already, you know, president of the union and working in the ED when I've actually got time. But I was quite taken aback by the fact that I was actually even considered. And I thought that it was pretty amazing, really. People thought that I had something to say and something to offer. And but they also wanted a shift from the far right hold on politics, local and national, and they're asking people to stand to fill spaces so that the change can actually occur and allow the policies of the people to come through rather than the rich and the powerful. And yeah, I was quite chuffed when I was asked, to be perfectly frank, but I won't be standing, of course.
No, fair enough. Sam, who has a very keen interest in local body politics, would like to know if it was a political party or members of the community that approached you, if you don't mind saying, because I realise that might not be something that you want to put out there.
I don't mind saying. It was actually a number of current councillors who actually asked me, who were very much in the left of parties, yes. So, and I suppose, you know, as the president of the union, I am not allowed to influence people's politics, but we are allowed to influence people on policy and strategy. And as far as I'm concerned, what is good for the health and well-being of the people and our ability as nurses to provide health care, that's where I will stand.
Perfect. I got no more questions. I'm all out.
Lovely way to end it. Thank you for joining us. And it was
Well,
lovely
thank
to
you
see
for asking me, Blake.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about the mix-up. I actually took a screenshot of your request and then sent it off by email to the boss to ask if I could join you today, and forgot that it was actually originally in a text, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting an answer. So there you are, the miracles of modern technology.
Yeah. Well,
Far easier to get things done now than it was 10 years ago.
Thanks again.
Okay, you take care, and Happy New Year to you both.
But
You too, Ed. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah, fascinating conversation. I'm going to put this one up from Special K. Imagine if we invested money into a top-notch healthcare industry that becomes a one-stop training destination for the world's nurses, doctors, researchers, rather than GMO mining and fossil fuel a-holes. I couldn't agree more, Special K. Absolutely. Blake seems to be having a little issue with his camera. I promise, not my fault this time.
Just checking something. I'm still here.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I was going to get you to riff while I uploaded the news, because I pre-recorded that, because that's just easier for me to do. I should probably also point out I'm not here next week, so I believe Sam from It's in the Ballad is going to be stepping in and playing. It'll be one of those soap opera things where it's like, today the role of Paul will be played by Sam from It's in the Ballad. You guys can do it if you want. That's entirely up to you. I'm not here to judge or pass any judgment on that one at all.
So there'll be a couple of episodes like that, actually, so it's a good point to bring it up now. We're going to do a little mini-series while Paul's away on his adventures.
Adventures. I'm taking a couple of Fridays off over the next couple of months so that I can do things like work with Will is one of them. I'm doing some work with his local board 21st of February. So that'll be an interesting experience. And then this Friday I'm working with Midge Marsden, of all people. So it's going to be a really fascinating time, but it means that is the odd Friday where I'm a bit busy.
Yes, you are coming, Sam. I know. I see you asking.
Yes, apparently that's confirmed. Apparently. So you two can nut that out. You can work that one out. It'll be fine. Absolutely fine.
But anyway, we'll be doing a few episodes on like local body elections and people standing and people standing down. So if there's anyone that you see in the news that you want to see, please let me know, and I'll try and get them.
Right. I'm going to try and upload the news. Give me 2 ticks. Let's see if this works for me. It's got the little spinny wheel. Oh, there we go. Okay. Technology. Let's watch the news. I should probably give this one just a little bit of a warning. There is at least one very adult joke in here. If there's young people in the room, maybe make them not in the room unless you want to answer a slightly awkward question about sticky things. Anyway, enjoy the news. Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's The News. Political parties all over the motu have been getting out to tell us what state the nation is in this week, with the 2 Chris's delivering speeches, the incoming Deputy Prime Minister trying to sell us on selling us to privatisation, and the current Deputy Prime Minister in the baking aisle of Woolworths looking for tinfoil to make a hat based on a lovely design that Tanya Unkovic sent him. The start of the year often sees speeches like these from political figures as they lay out their agenda for the year ahead. Add into the mix the local body elections in October and you've already gone to sleep. I'm sorry, please wake up. I'll keep making fun of politicians if that helps. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, seen here eyeing up the unflavoured chicken drumsticks being served across the room, gave his annual State of the Nation speech at the Auckland Chamber of Commerce, a fitting location since these are the only people who say confidence is up with the government in their regular business vibe survey. In his speech, Luxon spoke about focusing on economic growth, something he hoped meant that Nicola Willis would finally be able to afford Ben & Jerry's when she went to the movies. He chastised Auckland Council when he claimed more concerts at Eden Park would help with this. ignoring the fact that when Eden Park asked Auckland Council for 6 concerts a year, Auckland Council said yes. And when they asked for 12 a year, the council also said yes. But somehow it is still all the council's fault. He promised a growth in tourism numbers, which he expects to increase when any of the record 72,900 people who moved away from the country permanently last year come back to visit whānau. Meanwhile, in Palmerston North, Labour leader Chris Hipkins, seen here showing you how to dance the hokey pokey, spoke to his caucus about the need to focus on what media are calling areas traditionally the stronghold of National: crime and economics. While the party didn't reveal any concrete policy, it's expected to have more substance than gang patches bad but swastikas meh. Ram raids are coming to eat your babies, and it's okay if the Prime Minister financially benefits from moving the Bright Line test, as long as we don't have capital gains tax, used by the current government as slogans during the last election. David Seymour, seen here trying to force choke anyone who doesn't believe 8% is a big number, has announced he intends to do something that the Prime Minister won't, and go to Waitangi this year, despite warnings from his hapu to avoid the ceremonies in the wake of his Treaty Principles Bill. Said Seymour, "It's okay, they'll all be speaking in Te Reo, so I won't know what's happening. But if anyone yells at me, my supporters are going to blow that completely out of proportion and vilify all Māori for it." Speaking of David Seymour, seen here attending Diwali, a deeply religious festival that originated in India, where he was the only party leader not in attendance at Ratana Pa today, which he has often avoided, citing its religious aspects, instead choosing to use the day to give his State of the Nation speech, pushing for more privatisation in a speech that ACT sponsors are calling something I can't say here because this is a family-friendly show, but they have a hell of a sticky mess to clean up. An event so clearly important, almost every other politician in the country was elsewhere paying attention to something else. Seymour, the leader of one of the 3 coalition parties which currently governs, that set a record in business liquidation numbers, some of the fastest rising unemployment numbers on record, the biggest jump in beneficiaries and homelessness seen in a generation, the highest ever number of people leaving the country to relocate overseas ever, and the worst recession since the 90s, framed his speech as a counter to the steady decline the country is in by offering something he described as bold action. And because our media are clearly woke leftist shills, they all streamed his speech uninterrupted without criticism or critique, because 8% of the vote somehow warrants 100% of media platforming your message uncritically. In a bizarre move straight out of Season 2 of the hit comedy series The Good Place, Māori Affairs Minister Tama Potaka was seen doing push-ups in front of media at National's year-starting caucus in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. He claims it's about keeping fit, and nothing to do with not wanting to answer questions about why a right-wing blogger being praised by the same people who consider this action from Elon Musk as a sign of love, and a Manawatu councillor who uses Liz Gunn as a journalistic source to base his policies around, had been put on the Waitangi Tribunal. Media company NZME, owners of the hits ZM Radio Hauraki, Flavell, Coast, Gold, News Talk ZB, Business Desk and The Herald, have announced plans driven by falling revenue to cull nearly 40 jobs from within the organisation and to refocus content on output that engages with audiences. So, expect more clickbait and thinly veiled racism while they retain their highest paid stirrers whose media illiterate audience can't tell the difference between their opinion and actual news. In the United States, President Donald Trump, seen here bringing back masculine energy, was the first convicted felon to be sworn in as president at his second swearing-in ceremony. During his rambling speech, he made a false claim about the atom being split in America. While this is blatantly false and easily debunked, media here seem to focus more on that than on the concerning use of a Nazi salute by the richest man in the world, which RNZ described as an odd gesture. Within hours of signing multiple executive orders, states had already begun to sue the administration for breaching the Constitution. He had pardoned or commuted 1,600 people involved in the January 6 insurrection. He had ordered the government to call his friend Caitlyn Jenner Bruce from now on, removed Spanish-language versions of government websites, and fired 1,000 government workers for not being loyal enough. But you know, he took credit for the work of the New Zealanders, so we need to focus on that. And finally, Parapara Umu Beach was lit up by the warming glow of waves full of bioluminescent creatures, creating stunning blue waves. NIWA researchers have said that the organisms causing this are most likely plankton, and spotting an orange bloom of algae off the coast in daylight is a good indicator of a nighttime light show. They expected a few more days of shows like this to continue under current conditions, which are rare for the area this far south down the island, and are probably related to warming water temperatures caused by climate change, said Climate Change Minister Simon Watts. See, by pretending we're doing something about climate change, we're clearly making beautiful things like this possible. And that is this week's The News. There we go. That's the news. I'm going to answer a question that's been posed to me in the chat, and then I'm going to sign off because it's like 30 degrees in here. So the question I've got here is from Artie87. Do you think New Zealand media are making the same mistake with David Seymour as they did with Donald Trump? Because that's the follow-up question, in case anyone's wondering. Yes. Yeah, they are. The problem that we've got, actually, I'm working on a series at the moment, a podcast series, which again is available to Substack, and it'll roll out to everybody else around the 1st of February. It takes a look at headlines and how they spin and the bias that they put on things. And there are some really clearly obvious ones, like, I don't know if you guys saw it at the end of last year. What's that movie? Crocodile Dundee star dead at 90. That was the headline, and it was the crocodile, but it made it out to be Paul Hogan, and like a really obvious spin in the way that the media does things. So this takes a look at different headlines, how they spin things. And one thing that's become really clear in recording this is that pretty much anything ACT says goes up almost completely unfiltered. Same with David Seymour personally, it goes up almost completely unfiltered. The fact that he got away today with using that expression about indoctrinated university infesting students with the woke mind virus without any critical pushback shows you that there is a lot of media that's just like, you know what, we're just going to let him chill. The fact that somebody said something to him online about having stolen an idea around his speech, and he turns around and goes, we don't steal. That's what Green Party MPs do. Like, that's the kind of thing that he gets away with that other MPs couldn't. You couldn't get somebody like Chris Hipkins, for example, saying that, or Rawiri Waititi, because the media would just go nuts. So yeah, there is a really real risk of our media not giving enough criticism where it's required on at least one of our politicians. I think they also do that to a degree with Winston Peters. They don't give him a huge amount of pushback because it's Winston. So
I have one question for you before we go.
Sure.
You mentioned the good faith and the new Fright show, by the way. Now, was Tama playing the part of Kristen Bell or the guy from CIS?
No, he was actually playing in season 2 of The Good Place. There is, I can't remember the character's name, but he shows up very briefly as a new character who every time the main character brings up her issue, I don't want to spoil the series for anyone who hasn't seen it, he rips his shirt off and it's I really have to go to the gym, you know what? Keeping fit's my life now, so he doesn't have to have awkward conversations. And that's what this felt like, looking at Tama Potaka, somebody go, one of the media outlets saying to him, so what'd you do over the holiday break? And think, I worked out. Let me show you the number of push-ups that I can do. And what was his line? One life, one wife. That's why he's done it. That's right. Interesting. Very interesting.
Anyway, I'll be back next week with Sam, and we'll do some local body stuff. And Paul will be on an adventure.
Yeah, so I don't know if there'll be news next week. So we'll work on that. Well, yeah, we'll find out. Nobody watches us for the news anyway. It's all good. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you to it. Ka kite anō. Live long, prosper, be one with the force.
Good night,
I'll catch you guys all next time.